am writing this because I need to put it somewhere. I do not expect advice. I am not sure what I expect. I only know that if this stays only in my head, I will start doubting what I remember. I am 17 years old. I live in Saitama and commute to a prep school in Ikebukuro. My entrance exams are in February. Until recently, my biggest concerns were modern literature scores and whether I would get into Waseda. I still care about these things. I think that is important to say. I have not stopped going to school. I have not stopped studying. My life is mostly the same, but something has changed, and I cannot explain it in a way that makes sense. I take the Psycho line every day. I leave at 6:47 in the morning and return around 9:30 at night. The train is always crowded, but I prefer the early one because I can sometimes sit. I do not like talking in the morning. I do not like talking most of the time. I put in earbuds even when I am not listening to anything. People leave me alone. I am used to seeing the same faces. The woman with the red bag who gets off at Akabane. The salaryman who always sleeps past his stop and wakes up in a panic. The high school boy who watches baseball videos with the brightness too high. I do not know these people, but I know their patterns. It is comfortable in a way. Predictable. I first saw the man in the hat on a Tuesday in October. I was on the platform at Omiya, waiting for the express. It was early evening, still light, and I had stayed late to use the study room. I remember I had not spoken to anyone that day. Not to my classmates, not to the convenience store worker when I bought tea. I had simply pointed at the bottle and scanned my card. I did not even say thank you. The man was standing near the yellow line, closer to the edge than most people stand. He wore a dark coat and a wide-brimmed hat, the kind you do not see often. It looked old-fashioned. I could not see his face well because of the angle and the hat's brim. He stood in a way that felt deliberate, feet together, hands at his sides, still like he was posing for a photograph that did not exist. I did not think much of it. People wear strange things sometimes. But I noticed him again 3 days later. Same platform, same position, same hat. This time I was coming home from a mock exam. I had not spoken to anyone that day either. The proctor had called my exam number, but I only nodded. I had eaten a rice ball alone in the hallway during lunch. On the train ride, I did not answer when an old woman asked if the seat next to me was free. I just moved my bag. He was standing in almost exactly the same spot, facing the tracks. Still, I could not tell if he was looking at me or simply waiting for a train. I felt something then, not fear, just a small discomfort, a sense of repetition that seemed too precise. I told myself it was coincidence. Omiya is a major station. Thousands of people pass through. It would be stranger if I never saw anyone twice. The third time was the following Monday. I had gone the entire weekend without speaking. My parents were visiting my grandmother in Nagano. I stayed home to study. I did not call anyone. I did not go out except to the konbini, where I used the self-checkout. On Monday morning, I went to school as usual, but I was tired and did not feel like participating in group work. I stayed silent during the discussion. I ate lunch in the bathroom. On the platform that evening, he was there again. Same spot, same hat, same posture, feet together, hands at his sides. This time I watched him for a full minute. He did not move. He did not check his phone. He did not look at the departure board. He simply stood. I noticed that I could not see his face clearly. The brim of the hat shadowed it. But I had the sense that he was looking in my direction, not past me. When other people shifted around him, he did not react. It was as if they were not part of what he was doing. The train came. I got on. When I looked back through the window, he was still standing there. I began to notice a pattern. On days when I spoke, even once, I did not see him. On days when I did not speak to anyone at all, he appeared. I tested this unintentionally at first. On Tuesday, I said good morning to my homeroom teacher. I did not see the man. On Wednesday, I was silent all day. He was on the platform at Omiya when I transferred. I started keeping a record. I used a note app on my phone. I wrote down each day whether I had spoken and whether I had seen him. I also wrote down where he stood. because I wanted to prove to myself that I was not exaggerating. After 2 weeks, the pattern was clear. 12 days of silence, 12 sightings. 9 days with speech, 0 sightings. I tried to think of explanations. Perhaps he worked an irregular schedule that happened to align with mine. Perhaps I only noticed him on days when I was more alert, more observant. Perhaps my memory was playing tricks on me, filling in details that were not there. But the pattern held. I became very aware of my own voice. I began to notice how often I did not need to speak, how easy it was to go an entire day in silence if I chose to. Japan is a quiet country. People do not expect conversation. A nod is enough. A bow is enough. I found that I could attend school, take the train, buy food, and return home without saying a single word. On those days, he was always there. I started testing the boundaries deliberately. I wanted to understand the rules. On November 8th, I went the entire day without speaking. I saw him on the platform at 9:15 p.m. Then, while still on the platform, I said, "Excuse me," to a salaryman who was blocking the vending machine. Just 2 words. Not loud, not emotional, nothing I would remember on a normal day. The next time I looked, the man was gone. On November 11th, I remained silent until I got off the train at Omiya. I saw him on the platform as usual. I walked past him toward the exit. Then I stopped at a kiosk and said, "This one," to the worker, pointing at a magazine. When I turned around, he was no longer there. It was not gradual. He did not walk away. He was simply absent. I began to feel a strange tension on silent days. A pressure like the air in the station was heavier. I started carrying a small notepad in case I needed to write something instead of speaking. Then I realized that writing did not seem to count. Only my voice did. That thought stayed with me. I became very conscious of automatic greetings, the small acknowledgments that I usually made without thinking. I started to catch myself just before speaking, and then choosing not to, as if I were conserving something. I also began to notice that he was getting closer. At first, he had been 10 or 15 meters away, near the edge of the platform. By mid-November, he was standing near the benches, closer to the center. By late November, he was near the ticket gates. He was never directly in my path. He never blocked me, but the distance between us was shrinking. I thought about speaking to him. I thought about it many times, but I did not want to know what would happen if I did. On December 3rd, something changed. I had been silent all day. It was a Friday. I was tired. My mock exam scores had come back and they were not good. I felt heavy and distant. I did not want to talk to anyone. I got off the train at Omiya and walked toward the transfer gates. I saw him immediately. He was standing near the stairs to the Takasaki line, closer than ever before. For the first time, I could see part of his face. His skin was pale. His expression was neutral. He was looking directly at me. His feet were together. His hands were still at his sides. He did not blink. I stopped walking. He did not move. He did not change his posture. He simply watched. I felt my throat tighten. I thought about saying something. Anything. I could ask someone for the time. I could apologize to no one in particular. I could cough and say, "Excuse me," but I did not. I do not know why. Perhaps I was stubborn. Perhaps I wanted to prove that I was not afraid. Perhaps I was curious. I walked past him. I did not look back. When I reached the platform for my next train, I realized my hands were shaking. The following week, I broke my silence every single day. I said good morning to my teachers. I answered questions in class. I ordered coffee out loud at a cafe. I called my mother even though I had nothing to say. I did not see him once. I felt relief. I told myself it was over. I had imagined it. I had been stressed. Entrance exams do this to people. I was fine now, but I also felt something else. A kind of loss, as if I had given something up. On December 18th, I decided to stop talking again. I do not have a good reason. I was not trying to test anything. I was not trying to see him. I just woke up and decided that I did not want to speak. I went the entire day in silence. I took the train home. I transferred at Omiya. He was standing at the bottom of the stairs, less than 3 meters away. I could see his whole face now. It was ordinary, forgettable, the kind of face you would not remember, but his eyes were very focused. He was waiting for me. I turned and walked the other direction. I took a different exit. I went to the bathroom and stayed there for 10 minutes. When I came out, I went to a konbini and bought a tea. I said thank you to the worker, clearly and loudly. When I returned to the platform, he was gone. I decided I would not be silent again. For 2 weeks, I spoke every day. I volunteered answers. I made small talk. I greeted strangers. I became a person who talked. But it was exhausting. On January 9th, I forgot. I do not mean I chose silence. I mean I simply did not speak. It was an ordinary day. I was tired. No one asked me anything. I had no reason to talk. By the time I realized what had happened, it was past 9 p.m. and I was already on the train home. I felt my stomach drop. I got off at Omiya. I walked slowly toward the transfer. I told myself I would speak to someone. Anyone. I would ask for directions I did not need. I would comment on the weather. But the platform was nearly empty. There was no one close enough to speak to naturally. And then I saw him. He was standing directly in front of the stairs I needed to take, blocking the path, close enough that I could hear his breathing. He was not looking at me this time. He was looking slightly past me, but I knew he was aware of me. I could not move. I do not know how long I stood there. Maybe 30 seconds, maybe 2 minutes, long enough for my mouth to feel unfamiliar, as if I had forgotten how to use it. And then I heard my own voice. I did not plan it. I said, out loud to no one, "Excuse me," just that. 2 words. He turned his head slightly, just enough that I could see his eyes shift toward me. And then he was gone, not walking away, not fading, simply absent. I ran to the stairs. I got on the next train. I called my mother and talked about nothing until I reached my station. I have not been silent since. I speak every day now. I make sure of it. I greet people. I answer questions. I read text messages out loud to myself when I am alone. I talk to my reflection. I narrate my actions in a whisper. I do not know what he is. I do not know what he wants. I do not know if he is real. But I know the rule. And I know that I am afraid of what will happen if I ever forget again. Sometimes I wonder what would have occurred if I had stayed silent that night. If I had let him come closer. If I had let him reach me. I do not think he would have hurt me. I do not think he would have done anything at all. I think he would have just stood there, watching, waiting. I think that is worse. I am writing this because I do not want to forget. I need to remember why I have to keep speaking, why I cannot let a day pass in silence. My entrance exams are in 3 weeks. I will do my best. I will go to Wazita if I can. I will live a normal life, but I will never be quiet again.
I'm 34, based in Philadelphia, and I've spent the last 6 years working as a freelance investigative journalist. Most of my income comes from corporate due diligence reports, but the work I actually care about involves archival research, specifically reviewing unpublished documentation related to trauma, survivor testimonies that never made it to print, anonymous tip sheets from the 70s and 80s, recorded interviews conducted by graduate students who never finished their dissertations. I'm not looking for headlines. I'm looking for patterns in how people describe the worst moments of their lives, particularly when those descriptions never entered the public record. The work is ethically complicated. I have access to university archives, estate sales of deceased researchers, and a network of retired social workers who keep boxes of intake forms in their basements. Everything I review is either anonymized or so old that privacy concerns have effectively expired. I've never published a story that identified a living person without consent. What I do publish are meta-analyses, essays on narrative consistency, cultural contamination of memory, and the linguistics of trauma. It's dry, academic stuff. The kind of work that gets cited in footnotes. I'm writing this because 3 weeks ago, I stopped sleeping normally. Not insomnia. I sleep. But I wake up every morning with my phone's voice recorder running and no memory of turning it on. Yesterday I found a Word document on my desktop titled, "Do not open until." It was created at 4:47 a.m. 2 days ago. I don't remember writing it. I checked the file history like that would help. It didn't. The document is a list of dates and locations. I recognize all of them. They correspond to archival materials I've reviewed over the past 18 months. I need to explain how I got here. In September of last year, I was hired by a legal nonprofit to review a collection of unpublished case files related to wrongful institutionalizations in the 1960s. The organization was building a public database, and my job was to scrub identifying details while preserving the testimonial content. Standard archival prep work. Most of the files were exactly what you'd expect: desperate families, state-sponsored neglect, medications used as punishment. But 6 of the files, all from different facilities, different states, spanning 1961 to 1968, contained a detail I couldn't ignore. In each case, the subject had reported seeing a man in a hat in their room at night. Not a staff member. Not another patient. The descriptions were nearly identical: tall, no visible face, standing near the door or window, never moving. The accounts were brief. In 4 cases, the detail appeared in intake notes written by nurses. In 2 cases, it appeared in letters the patients had written to family members, which had been confiscated and added to their files as evidence of delusional thinking. None of the 6 individuals had ever met. 3 were women, 3 were men. Ages ranged from 19 to 56. Different diagnoses. Different cities. I flagged it as a potential case of institutional folklore, a shared hallucination or narrative borrowing, the kind of thing that happens in closed environments. I wrote a 3-paragraph summary for the non-profit and moved on. 2 months later, I was reviewing oral history interviews conducted in 1983 with survivors of a factory fire in Lawrence, Massachusetts. The fire had occurred in 1971. Most of the interviews focused on labor conditions and negligence, but one transcript stopped me cold. A woman, identified only as Yem, 47 at the time of the interview, described waking up in the hospital 3 days after the fire. She said she remembered very little about the fire itself, but she remembered the hospital room. She remembered a man standing near the window, tall, wearing a hat, no face she could make out. She said she hadn't told the nurses because she thought it was a grief hallucination. Her brother had died in the fire. Then she said, "I don't know why I'm telling you this now. I've never told anyone." The interviewer didn't follow up. The next question was about union organizing. I went back to the institutionalization files. I reread the letters. In one of them, a 22-year-old woman had written to her mother, "There is a man who stands in my room at night. I have not told the nurses because they will say I am sicker than I am." That's when I started the spreadsheet. Over the next 4 months, I went through everything in my personal archive, 15 years of collected materials, most of it digitized, organized by topic and decade. I was looking for any mention of a figure matching the description: tall, male, wearing a hat, appearing in contexts of distress or trauma, and notably, mentioned in passing or withheld from official accounts. I found 31 references. They appeared in a 1979 police report from a home invasion in Ohio, mentioned in a single sentence during a follow-up interview with the survivor, who described seeing a man in a long coat and hat standing in her hallway the night after the attack. She told the officer she assumed it was a detective. It wasn't. A 1955 diary entry written by a teenager whose father had recently died by suicide. She described waking up and seeing the man with the hat standing at the foot of her bed. The next entry, 3 weeks later, made no reference to it. A recorded therapy session from 1991, part of a graduate research project on PTSD, in which a Gulf War veteran mentioned, almost as an aside, that he'd seen a guy in an old hat standing outside his apartment at night multiple times. He laughed when he said it. Said he figured it was stress. 6 different letters written by children removed from abusive homes between 1968 and 1984, collected by a social worker in Minnesota. 4 of the children mentioned the tall man or the man in the black hat. None of the letters were sent. The social worker had kept them as part of a private research project that was never completed. The pattern held across all 31 cases, and it was consistent in a way I didn't like. The figure appeared in proximity to trauma, loss, or fear. The description was consistent: tall, male, wearing a hat, often described as a fedora or wide-brimmed hat, no clear face. The subject either did not report the sighting to authorities, or reported it in a way that was dismissed or minimized. The subject often expressed uncertainty about whether to mention it at all. I did what I always do. I started researching explanations. The Hat Man is a known phenomenon. I'm not pretending I discovered something new. There are entire forums dedicated to it, mostly sleep paralysis communities. Thousands of people report seeing a tall, shadowy figure in a hat during episodes of sleep paralysis. The consistency of the description is usually explained through cultural contamination. People read about the Hat Man online, then experience sleep paralysis, and their brains fill in the expected details. But here's the problem: most of the accounts I found predated the internet. Some predated widespread knowledge of sleep paralysis as a concept, and none of them described paralysis. They described waking up, sitting up, seeing the figure, and then, almost universally, choosing not to speak about it or speaking about it only in private, years later. I spent 2 weeks trying to frame this as a Jungian archetype. The shadow figure, the psychopomp, the animus. It didn't fit. The Hat Man in these accounts wasn't symbolic. He wasn't doing anything. He was just there, and then he wasn't. I tried sociological explanations. Shared cultural imagery from film noir, detective shows, early 20th century men's fashion. But the descriptions appeared in populations with no clear media overlap. Children in rural areas, institutionalized patients with no access to television, adults who explicitly said they had no reference point for what they'd seen. I tried trauma theory, hypervigilance, false pattern recognition, the brain's tendency to construct humanoid shapes in ambiguous visual data. That made sense for individual cases, but it didn't explain the consistency or the silence. Then I found the tape. In early January, I bought a box of old reel-to-reel tapes at an estate sale in Baltimore. The estate belonged to a psychologist who had died in 2003. Most of the tapes were labeled with patient initials and dates from the 1970s. Ethically, I shouldn't have bought them. Legally, they were sold as part of a cleared estate, and the psychologist's practice had closed decades ago. I told myself I'd listen to them once, catalog them, and donate them to a medical archive. I listened to 43 tapes. 42 were exactly what you'd expect: depression, anxiety, marital problems, grief. The 43rd tape was labeled RG September 14th, 77 Final. The session started normally. RG was a man, mid-30s, describing ongoing nightmares following a car accident. But 15 minutes in, he stopped mid-sentence. Long pause. Then, "There's something I haven't told you." The psychologist asked him to continue. RG said, "After the accident, when I was still in the hospital, I woke up one night and there was a man in my room. Tall. Wearing a hat. I couldn't see his face. He was just standing there by the door. I rang for the nurse, and when she came in, he was gone. I didn't tell her. I thought I was losing my mind." The psychologist asked if he'd seen the figure again. RG said yes. 3 more times. Always at night, always in his apartment, always standing, always silent. Then RG said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. If I don't tell anyone else about this, if I just stop talking about it, will it go away?" The psychologist said something about avoidance and exposure therapy. Standard clinical response. RG interrupted him. "That's not what I mean. I mean, if I don't say it out loud anymore. If I just stop." There was a long pause. Then RG said, "Never mind. Forget I said anything." The tape ended 10 minutes later. RG thanked the psychologist and said he wouldn't be scheduling another session. He sounded calm, relieved, even. I searched for RG. I used every database I have access to. I found nothing. No obituary, no public records, no follow-up documentation. but I found the psychologist's notes in the same box. Brief, handwritten, dated September 14th, 77. RG terminated therapy. Expressed belief that silence equals safety. Did not press. Concerned, but PT seemed resolute. No clear risk indicators. Below that, in different ink, dated 6 months later. RG called office yesterday. Left message asking if I'd seen anyone unusual near my home. Did not return call. Number disconnected. That was 4 weeks ago. Since then, I've stopped working on other projects. I've gone through everything again. I found 16 additional references I'd missed the first time, including 2 from the last 5 years, both posted anonymously on trauma support forums. Same description. Same silence afterward. One of the users deleted their account the day after posting. I started making phone calls. I tracked down 3 people who had mentioned the figure in old documents. People who were still alive, who I could contact without violating ethics guidelines. 2 of them hung up when I mentioned the Hat Man. The third, an 81-year-old woman in Oregon, told me, "I don't talk about that anymore. I made a decision a long time ago, and I'm not going back on it." I asked her what she meant. She said, "You don't feed the things that watch you." Then she asked me a question I haven't been able to stop thinking about. "How many people have you told about this?" I said I hadn't told anyone. It was research. Private. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Good. Keep it that way." She hung up. That night, I woke up at 3:18 a.m. I didn't know why. I was sitting up in bed, and my phone was in my hand, and the voice recorder was running. I played it back. 47 seconds of silence. Then my own voice, very quiet. "He's in the hall." I don't remember saying it. I don't remember waking up. I don't remember anything. I checked the hallway. Nothing. But here's the thing I can't explain. My apartment door was unlocked. I always lock it. Always. I've started keeping the lights on. I've stopped reviewing old files. I've tried to tell myself this is stress, pattern recognition gone haywire, the brain creating connections that aren't there. But 3 days ago, I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. No subject line. The message was a single sentence. "You should finish what you started." Attached was a scanned document. A police report from 1984, Scranton, Pennsylvania. A woman reported seeing an intruder in her home, described as tall, wearing a hat, standing near her daughter's bedroom. Officers found no evidence of forced entry. The case was closed. Handwritten at the bottom of the report, in pencil. Victim called station 6 weeks later. Asked to reopen case. Said she'd stopped seeing him after she stopped talking about it. Advised victim no further action warranted. I don't know who sent me that email. The address bounced when I tried to reply. Here's what I think is happening, and I know how it sounds. I think there is something that appears in proximity to trauma. I think it's been appearing for a long time. I think it's consistent because it's real, not in the way we usually define real, but real in the sense that it has rules, patterns, a logic we can observe. And I think the rule is this: it continues as long as you continue to acknowledge it. The people who stopped talking about it, RG, the woman in Oregon, the victims who never followed up, they made a choice. They chose silence. And according to the fragmented evidence I have, the sightings stopped. But I've done the opposite. I've documented it. I've catalogued it. I've spent 6 months pulling it out of the dark. And now I can't stop thinking about what the woman in Oregon said: "You don't feed the things that watch you." Last night, I made a decision. I'm writing this post, and then I'm deleting the spreadsheet. I'm deleting the files. I'm boxing up the tapes and the documents and donating them to an archive where they'll be sealed for another 50 years. I'm choosing silence. I don't know if it'll work. I don't know if the Hat Man is a cultural contagion, a shared delusion, a neurological glitch, or something else. I don't know if I've made it worse by writing this. But I know that every person who stopped talking about it also stopped seeing it. And I know that I woke up this morning and found another Word document on my desktop, created while I was asleep. It's titled, "He Knows You're Writing This." I haven't opened it. I'm posting this, and then I'm walking away. If you're reading this and you've seen him too, I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you what I've learned. Some things exist in the space between acknowledgement and silence. And some things only continue because we keep talking about them. I'm done talking.
I saw the Hat Man, and I can't sleep like a normal person anymore. I'm writing this at 4:47 a.m. with every light in the house on because my bedroom doesn't feel like mine right now. The AC keeps kicking on and off like it's trying to pretend everything's normal. It isn't. I'm 20. I'm in the Houston area. I worked third shift at a distribution center, the kind of place that smells like cardboard dust, hot plastic wrap, and old sweat no matter how much they mop. I'm not the ghost story type. I've spent my whole life rolling my eyes at paranormal stuff. Ghost hunting shows, camera tricks, Ouija boards, party games, sleep paralysis demons, your brain glitching while your body's still in REM mode. That's what I believed. Now I'm sitting on my couch watching the hallway like a dog that heard something outside. Let me back up. We were understaffed and I needed the overtime. 4 weeks straight, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., no days off. I was saving up to move out, get my own place, do the whole adult life thing. If you've ever worked nights, you know it's not just being tired. It's like living slightly out of phase with the rest of humanity. Your meals are wrong. Your morning is someone else's afternoon. The sun feels personal, like it's trying to bully you awake. By week 3, I was running on fumes. Energy drinks for breakfast, cigarettes for lunch, whatever was quick and cheap for dinner. The kind of food you eat standing up at a gas station with a receipt stuck to your boot. My buddy Marcus kept telling me I looked like hell. Not joking either. He's the kind of guy who'll tell you you're looking rough and then hand you another pallet jack like that's a solution. You're gonna faceplant into a conveyor one night, he said and laughed. I laughed too, because at that point laughter and caffeine were about all I had left. That last week, though, something started happening that I couldn't chalk up to being tired, not cleanly anyway. It started small. I'd be walking between rows of shelves and catch something in my peripheral vision. Not like a person, not like movement, just a patch of darkness that felt too dark compared to everything around it. Like the lights didn't reach it the way they should. I'd snap my head around and there'd be nothing there. Just boxes, safety signs, yellow floor tape, the same busted fan rattling overhead. That happened a handful of times, and I told myself it was exhaustion. That's what you do when your brain throws you something weird. You label it, shrug, keep moving. Then Friday night hit. Or Saturday morning. Technically, my shift ended at 6 a.m. I got home around 6:30, the sky already bright and washed out, like Houston summer does when it's fixing to be miserable by noon. My mom was up in the kitchen making breakfast, bacon smell filling the hallway. She took one look at me and her face did that thing moms do where they don't want to scare you but they're scared anyway. "Baby, you look awful," she said. That's Texan mom language for "you look like a hospital is about to happen." "I'm done as of today, Ma," I said, words coming out slow. "Just gotta sleep. Like, for a year." She made me eat first, scrambled eggs, toast, a glass of water she practically forced into my hands. I didn't have the energy to argue. Then I stumbled to my room. It was about 7:15 a.m. Sun blasting the neighborhood. I had blackout curtains that turned my room into a cave. Perfect for day sleeping. I collapsed on the bed without even taking off my work boots. Didn't brush my teeth, didn't change clothes, didn't check my phone. Just exhaustion, heavy and immediate, dragging me under. I was out in seconds. I need you to understand something before you read the next part. I'm a heavy sleeper. Always have been. I've slept through thunderstorms that knocked out power. I once slept through a car alarm going off outside my window for 20 minutes, and my little sister still tells that story like it's funny. So when I woke up, I knew it wasn't normal. I didn't wake up gradually. I didn't drift up to the surface. I felt like I got yanked awake. Like something grabbed my awareness by the collar and pulled it back into my body. My eyes snapped open, and I couldn't move. Not my arms, not my legs, not my head, nothing. The only thing I could control was my eyes, and even my breathing felt wrong. Shallow, tight, like there was a belt around my ribs. Panic hit hard and fast. I tried to call out for my mom, tried to shout, tried to even make a sound. My throat wouldn't do it. My mouth wouldn't do it. No noise. Not even a whimper. My room was dark, but not pitch black. The blackout curtains leaked thin lines of light around the edges, just enough to see shapes. Desk in the corner. Closet door cracked like always. Dirty laundry pile I'd ignored for 2 weeks. A water bottle on the floor. And then I saw the corner by the closet. There was a shadow there that didn't belong. At first my brain tried to do what it always does, label it as something harmless. A coat, a stack of boxes, a trick of light. But shadows don't stand up straight. Shadows don't have shoulders. This one did. He was tall. I don't mean tall guy. I mean the kind of tall that makes your brain do quick math and come up short. 6.5 feet at least, maybe more. And the weird thing was it didn't look like he was in the corner so much as the corner was failing to contain him. Like the darkness in that area had depth, and he was occupying it. And then I saw the hat. That's the part that made my stomach drop because it was too specific. It wasn't random. It wasn't my imagination grabbing a vague shape. It was a wide-brimmed hat, like an old detective movie, brim cutting a clean line across the dark. That brim was crisp, edges defined like they'd been drawn. The hat cast shadow over where his face should have been. Except there wasn't a face. No features at all. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. Just darkness. Solid and absolute, like it absorbed what little light was in the room. I'm not being poetic. That's the closest description I have. And I knew he was looking at me. I know how that sounds. I know. But if you've ever walked into a room and felt somebody's eyes on you before you even turned your head, you know what I mean. This was that, except it felt like weight. Like a tension you could feel on your skin. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Sweat started pooling at my temples and sliding down into my eyes. I wanted to blink it away and couldn't. He didn't move at first. He just stood there, silent and patient, like he had all the time in the world and I was the one on a timer. Then he started moving. No footsteps. No shift in the floorboards. He didn't walk. He glided, smooth and deliberate, as if the air was doing the work for him. From the closet corner toward the foot of my bed. The closer he got, the more wrong the room felt. Not in a movie way. In a physical way. The air got thick. The hum of the house, distant street noise, seemed to fade back like someone turned down the world. The temperature felt like it dropped, and my skin prickled like I'd stepped into shade after being in the sun too long. When he reached the foot of my bed, he stopped. Just stood there. The hat brim angled slightly downward, like he was studying me. Not angry. Not frantic. Curious. Then he did something that made my stomach turn inside out. He tilted his head. Just a small tilt. Not dramatic, but it was so deliberate. Like a person reacting to something unexpected. Like something intelligent deciding what to do next. In that moment, the fear changed. Before, it was panic. My body reacting to paralysis. After that head tilt, it was something colder. The kind of fear you get when you realize you're not dealing with random noise, you're dealing with something that's paying attention. I tried to force air into my lungs. My chest wouldn't expand right. It felt like my ribs were locked. And then I felt it. Pressure on my chest. Not like a dream. Not like anxiety. Like something was pressing down with both hands. Steady, heavy, increasing. My lungs burned. The edges of my vision started to fuzz. Little dark flecks drifted at the corners like I was about to pass out. I couldn't scream. Couldn't roll away. Couldn't do anything except stare while my body betrayed me. The hat man leaned forward slightly. Not much. Just enough that he filled more of my vision. And the pressure got heavier. My thoughts got stupid simple, primal. Breathe, breathe, breathe. I was sure I was about to black out. And some part of my brain, some terrified, stubborn part, decided if I was going to go out, I wasn't going out without fighting. I put everything I had into one goal, move one finger. Just one. My right pinky twitched. Barely. The smallest movement imaginable. But it was movement. And the instant it happened, everything snapped. The Hat Man jerked backward like I'd shoved him. The pressure vanished. I sucked in a huge breath so hard it hurt. Air never tasted so good. He was still there for a split second at the foot of my bed, but he looked less solid now, like the definition was slipping. Like he was losing grip on whatever made him there. My finger twitched again. Then my hand. Then my arm. The paralysis broke like a glass pane cracking. As soon as I could move my head, I tore my eyes away, looked toward my door, my window, anywhere else, like looking at him was feeding it. Then I looked back. He was gone. Not faded. Not melted into the shadows. Gone. Like he'd never been there at all. I laid there shaking and gasping, trying to decide if I was going to throw up or cry or laugh. The room felt normal again. The air felt normal. The AC hum crept back in. The closet door was still cracked. Laundry still piled. Same dim light leaking around the curtains. But I knew what I saw. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands. It was 10:23 a.m. I had been asleep a little over 3 hours. I did what any modern idiot does when reality stops behaving. I Googled it. Shadow Man with hat. I expected creepypasta. SCP nonsense. TikTok garbage. Instead I got a wall of results. Threads, forums, videos, people describing the same silhouette, the same hat brim, the same pressure on the chest, the same certainty of being watched. They called him the Hat Man. I sat there in my bed and scrolled until my eyes hurt. People from all over the place, different ages, different backgrounds, saying the same phrases I was thinking. Same corner of the room placement. Same no-face description. Same hat. That consistency was the part that kept punching through my skepticism. I read about sleep paralysis, REM atonia, hypnagogic hallucinations, amygdala firing like a car alarm. I wanted that explanation. I tried to force my mind to accept it because it's clean. It's comforting. It means the monster stays inside your skull where it belongs. But it didn't explain the part that mattered to me. Why a hat? Why something so specific? Why something that felt patient?
I work nights at a hospital in Baltimore, and something's been happening that I can't explain. I don't believe in ghosts. I didn't believe in ghosts. I still don't know what I believe, but I know I can't work there anymore. I've been a maintenance tech at Johns Hopkins Bayview for about 4 years. Night shift, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. 4 nights a week. It's steady work. The pay's decent. Most nights I'm alone in whatever wing I'm working, which suits me fine. I fix leaking pipes, replace light ballasts, check the HVAC, respond to work orders. The building's a patchwork, newer additions stitched onto older sections, basements and service corridors that feel like a different world from the patient floors, so there's always something breaking down. You get used to the quiet. You get used to long hallways with half the lights off to save power. You get used to your footsteps echoing and the hum of the ventilation system and occasionally seeing your reflection in the glass doors that separate one unit from another. It's just part of the environment. You stop noticing it after a while. I started noticing it again about 3 months ago. It was late February, maybe 2 a.m., and I was down in the subbasement checking on a pump that kept cycling on and off. The subbasement isn't creepy or anything. It's just mechanical rooms, storage, old tunnels connecting different buildings, fluorescent lights, concrete, industrial shelving. I'd been down there 100 times. I was walking back toward the stairs when I passed a door with a window in it. Just a small rectangular pane of wired safety glass. I glanced at it out of habit, the way you do when you're tired and your brain is on autopilot. My reflection moved past in the glass, and behind my reflection, maybe 10 feet back, there was someone else. Not a blur, not a trick of angle. A person shape standing where there shouldn't have been room for one. I stopped so hard my heels scuffed the concrete. Then I turned around. The hallway was empty. I looked back at the window. Just me. I stood there for maybe 30 seconds, looking back and forth between the glass and the hallway behind me, waiting for my eyes to correct whatever mistake they'd made. Nothing. I was tired. I'd been awake for 18 hours because I'd picked up an extra shift. Your brain does weird things when you're that tired. I know that. I went home and slept and didn't think much about it. 2 weeks later, I was up on the 4th floor of a main building replacing a ballast in one of the patient corridors. It was around 3 a.m. I had my ladder set up, my tool bag, the panel open. I was reaching up into the fixture when I caught movement in the corner of my eye. There's a nurse's station at the end of every corridor, desk, computers, filing cabinets, and usually a big window behind it that looks out over the parking lot. The window was dark, and in that dark window, I could see the reflection of the hallway behind me. Someone was standing at the far end, 30, maybe 40 feet back, completely still. I looked over my shoulder. Nobody there. I looked back at the window. The figure was still in the reflection. Tall, dark coat or jacket, and a hat, wide-brimmed, like an old fedora. The hat is what made my stomach go cold, because it didn't feel like my brain filling in blanks. It felt specific. My hand started shaking so badly I dropped a screw. I packed up my tools, left the panel open, and went down to the break room. I made coffee I didn't even want. I sat there for 20 minutes, telling myself I was seeing things. Shadows from the parking lot lights. Fatigue. Confirmation bias, because I'd seen something weird 2 weeks ago, and now my brain was primed to see patterns. I went back up and finished the job. I didn't look at the window. After that, I started noticing how many reflective surfaces there are in a hospital. Glass doors everywhere. Polished metal panels on the elevator interiors. The black screens of turned-off monitors. The windows at night. Stainless steel countertops in staff kitchens. You're surrounded by reflections, and once you start paying attention to them, you can't stop. It becomes a habit the way checking your mirrors becomes a habit when you think someone's tailing you. I started seeing him regularly. Not every shift, but maybe once or twice a week. Always in a reflection. Always standing still. Always wearing a hat. He was never in the same place twice. Sometimes he'd be far away, at the end of a corridor. Sometimes closer. Once I saw him in the reflection of a metal paper towel dispenser in a restroom, just standing in the doorway behind me. I spun around and the doorway was empty. When I looked back at the dispenser, he was gone from the reflection too.
I tried to find explanations. I started checking the security camera feeds when I had access to them, looking for footage of the areas where I'd seen him. Nothing. I asked the other night shift guys if they'd noticed anyone walking around who shouldn't be there. Patients wandering, visiting family who'd overstayed, anything. Nobody had seen anything. I thought maybe it was someone messing with me, but the timing was wrong. I work alone. I'm not on a fixed route. Nobody could predict where I'd be or when I'd look at a particular reflective surface. I thought maybe it was some neurological thing. Early onset schizophrenia. A brain tumor. I made an appointment with my doctor, got a physical, did blood work. Everything normal. I didn't mention the hallucinations. I didn't want it in my medical record. The thing is, I never saw him directly. Not once. Only in reflections. And he never moved. He just stood there, always facing my direction, always still. Until he started getting closer. It was gradual. I didn't notice it at first, but I started mentally noting where he appeared, the distance, the angle, and over the course of a few weeks, the distance decreased. In March, he was always at least 20 or 30 feet away. By mid-April, sometimes he was 10 feet back, then 5. I started avoiding reflective surfaces. I'd take the stairs instead of the elevator, so I wouldn't have to see the polished metal walls. I'd look down when I walked past glass doors. I'd turn on monitors if I had to work near them, so the screen wouldn't be a black mirror. But you can't avoid every reflection in a building like that, and the harder I tried not to look, the more I catch glimpses by accident. The worst part was that I started to recognize details. The hat was definitely a fedora, dark gray or black. The coat was long, like an old-fashioned overcoat. I never saw his face clearly. It was always in shadow or too far away, or the reflection was too distorted. But I got the sense that he was tall, thin, Patient. That's the word that kept coming to mind, and I hated it. Patient like he wasn't in a hurry. Patient like he had been there longer than I'd been alive. Patient like the building itself was just something he used to stand in. I started having trouble sleeping during the day. I'd lie in bed in my apartment with the curtains drawn, and I'd think about him, standing there in the reflections, just waiting. Waiting for what? I didn't know. I still don't. In early May, I was working in the older wing, the part that used to be patient rooms years ago and is mostly offices now. It was around 4 a.m. I was checking a radiator that had been making noise. The office was small, just a desk and a filing cabinet and a window that looked out over an interior courtyard. The window was dark. I could see my reflection in it, lit by the dim overhead light in the room. He was right behind me, maybe 3 feet back, close enough that if he were real, I would have felt him there. Close enough that I could see the texture of his coat and the hard angle of his hat brim. I didn't turn around. I knew if I turned around he wouldn't be there. I just stood there, staring at his reflection, and for the first time, I tried to see his face. It was like trying to focus on something in a dream. Every time I thought I was about to see it clearly, it would blur or shift, or the angle would be wrong. But I got the impression of pale skin, shadows where the eyes should be, and the sense, I can't explain this, the sense that he wasn't just in the reflection. It felt like the reflection was where he belonged. My chest felt tight. My hands went numb. I backed out of the room without turning around, and I didn't stop moving until I was outside the building. I called in sick the next 2 shifts. I stayed home. I kept the lights on. I covered the mirrors in my apartment with towels and bed sheets because I couldn't stand the idea of seeing him there too. When I went back to work, I requested a transfer to day shift. They said there were no openings. I asked if I could switch to a different building, even with a pay cut. Same answer. I thought about quitting, but I've got rent and student loans and no other job lined up. So I went back, and I developed a system. I stopped looking at reflections entirely. If I had to walk past a glass door, I'd look at the floor or the ceiling. If I had to work near a window at night, I'd angle myself so I couldn't catch it in my peripheral vision. If I saw a turned-off monitor, I'd turn it on or face away from it. I bought a headlamp so I wouldn't have to rely on ambient light that might create reflections. It worked for a while. 2 weeks, maybe 3. I didn't see him. I started to think maybe it had stopped. Maybe it had been stress and exhaustion and some kind of temporary psychotic break, and now it was over. Then I was in the basement, late May, working on a backup generator. There was a puddle on the floor near the generator, just a small pool of water from a slow drip in one of the overhead pipes. I was on my knees, opening the generator panel, when I glanced down and saw the puddle. It was reflective, just barely but enough. He was standing right next to me. I could see his legs in the reflection, the bottom of his coat, close enough that if I reached out, I would have touched him. I scrambled backward. My shoulders hit the wall. I stared at the spot where he should have been. Nothing. Empty air. I looked back at the puddle. The reflection was gone. I don't remember leaving the basement. I don't remember getting to my car. I remember sitting in the parking lot with the doors locked, shaking so hard I couldn't get the key in the ignition for a couple of minutes. I didn't go back inside. I drove home. I didn't call in. I just didn't show up. They called me the next day. I told them I quit. My supervisor asked if I was okay. I said I was fine. I just found another job. That was a lie. I haven't found another job. I haven't left my apartment much. Here's the thing I can't get out of my head. I've been trying to tell myself it was all in my mind. Fatigue, stress, some kind of progressive hallucination that got worse because I kept reinforcing it by looking for it. And maybe that's true. Maybe there was never anything there. But 2 days after I quit, I was in my apartment, making coffee in the kitchen. The window over the sink faces the building across the street. It was early evening, still light out, and the window was just barely reflective. Not like a mirror, just a faint ghost of the room behind me. I wasn't thinking about it. I was just standing there, waiting for the coffee to brew. And I saw him in the window, inside my apartment, standing in the doorway between the kitchen and the living room. I spun around. Nothing. When I looked back at the window, he was gone. I don't look at reflective surfaces anymore. I covered every mirror. I keep the curtains closed. I canceled my gym membership because the locker room has too many mirrors. I avoid windows at night. I've stopped wearing my watch because sometimes I can catch a faint reflection in the crystal face. I'm looking for a new place to live. Somewhere with fewer windows, fewer glass surfaces. I'm thinking maybe I'll move out of the city entirely. I know how this sounds. I know the rational explanation is that I've developed some kind of paranoia or compulsion and I need help. And maybe I'll get help. But right now I can't risk it. Because here's what I keep thinking about. He never moved when I was looking at him. He was always still. But every time I looked away and then looked back, he was closer. Like he only moves when you're not watching. And if that's true, if that's how it works, then the only thing keeping him at a distance is the act of looking. And I don't know what happens if I stop.